For our access control, we also need to understand that each entity, that could be a person or a company, can have different identities, and each of these identities can have different attributes. Identities correspond to entities, and identities consists of attributes. And I've had students who have struggled with this a little bit, and the best way I can explain it is, the entity is you, or in this case, me. I am Thor. But I can have different identities, and no, that doesn't mean I'm a hidden superhero. That would just be far too obvious with that name. But for the local college here, for instance, I could have taken a degree there some years ago. I could be pursuing another one now, and I could be teaching there. For the degree I finished, I would be alumni. That would be one identity. With that one identity, I would have access or attributes to certain items. As a current student, that would be another identity. And with that identity, I would have access to other stuff. And then finally, if I'm a teacher as well, it's another identity. I'm still Thor, but that identity would have access to other attributes. I hope that makes sense. And it's really the same for companies. It could be a parent company, like Alphabet, that then under its umbrella have other companies that then have different attributes. So logically through a few times in your head, and remember, identities correspond to an entity, and identities consist of attributes. And we would also have an identity and access provisioning lifecycle. And there are many different templates out there for stuff you can use in your organization. On this page, I have the one from IBM's Tivoli Identity Manager, but obviously if your organization doesn't have one, find one that works for yours. And all they really do is they allow administrators to set up if-then statements. If this happens, then do this. Passwords are checked against our compliance. We notify the users before their password expire. We might do something if an account is inactive for 30 or more days. Then we might lock the account. We might do the same with new user accounts that haven't been used for 10 days. Many of the places I've worked in, we create user accounts as soon as the person is hired. But the onboarding process can take months. So in this case, that would probably not be a smart idea. And then if an employee has been suspended for more than 30 days, we can delete the account. I don't know if I would do this either. Obviously, the second they're suspended, we lock their account, so they can't access anything. But for good audit trails, account deletion is not really a good idea. And then finally, if we have contractors or business partners we stop doing business with, when their contract or their affiliation with our system is terminated, we do the same. We revoke their access rights and lock their accounts. We can also use federated identity. This is where we link a person's electronic identity across multiple distinct identity management systems. And for this, we would use FIDM, or Federated Identity Management. With that, we have a common set of policies, practices, protocols in place that we use to manage the identity and the trust of the IT users and the devices across our organization. Federated identity is much more than single sign-on, but single sign-on is a subset of it. All single sign-on uses is the authentication and then the technical interoperability, meaning they can function together and talk to each other. And we can use many different platforms for our federated identity management. Some of the most common ones would be SAML, OAuth, OpenID Secure Tokens, Microsoft Azure Cloud Services, and Windows Identity Foundation. And if we quickly look at SAML, or Security Association Markup Language, it's an XML-based open standard data format that we use to exchange authentication and authorization data between multiple parties. And one of the key facts you need to know is that SAML addresses uses web browser SSO. And SSO, or single sign-on, is where we sign into one place, and having signed into that one place, we then have access to multiple systems or applications. And it is another of those places where easier very rarely means more secure. It is much easier for the end user. At some point, I worked in the finance industry, and our credit card department had 15, maybe 20 systems they need to log into on a daily basis, which all had different passwords. So for them, when we implemented SSO, it was much easier. They will log into the SSO, and then from there, they could access everything. And that really is the trick there. They can access everything with a single login. Meaning, if the attacker compromises that one login, they now have access to all those systems. Whereas before, if they compromised one password, they would have access to one system. And as IT security professionals, that's where we have to strike the balance. Are we okay to weaken our security posture here a little? And do we have something else that we can put in place to make up for that? In this case, we might add restrictions where this can only happen from our internal network. Whereas before, we might have had employees being able to log in from home. We might add time restrictions. If we know the credit card department is only there from 8 to 5, outside of 8 to 5, everything's locked down. And then we have super sign-on. Super horrible idea. At least if you want to stay secure. There are tens of thousands of pages out there that allows you to log in with your Facebook account, which is smart for them because they now have all the information that Facebook shares about you. But again, if that one account is compromised, they can have access to everything that you've tied to that Facebook account. While it is easier, it is also a lot less secure. And just like we have software as a service, infrastructure as a service, we can also have identity as a service, or IDaaS. And this is just someone else doing it for us. And just like any other cloud solution, it can be us going to them. Somewhere in the cloud, they have something we authenticate and authorize against. Or it could be a hybrid solution where the provider's cloud directory is linked to our on-premises identity and access management systems. I have so far not worked anywhere where they use that. In most cases, it's the other way. We have a software as a service solution somewhere, and that software as a service solution authenticates our users towards our backend within the organization.